Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our free webinar today. This is the MEA's third free webinar in the past 8 weeks. Today's topic is consultation expectations for Schedule A+ projects in the Municipal Class EA process. I just want to welcome you to taking time from your busy day to join us today. We've had over 260 people register for today's webinar. I'd like to introduce the panel today. We have myself, my name's 𝗣𝗂𝗶𝗀. I'm the Executive Director of the Municipal Engineers Association. In the background, we have Amin Menina, who's the MEA's Member Services Coordinator, and he's helping us. And our presenter today is Paul Knowles, who's our MCEA advisor. I've known Paul for over 12 years. He's been involved in the municipal class environmental assessment process for many, many years. He's been teaching our classroom courses on MCEA. He's also been heavily involved in all the amendments in the past 10 to 15 years with MCEA. So he'll be our presenter today. I just want to give everyone participating today a heads up that we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. Paul's presentation should take 20 to 30 minutes. And our questions will be for about 15 minutes. We ask that you please submit your questions using the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. We will be recording this webinar. It'll be posted to our website in a few days. So if you can't participate for all of it, you can see a recording of it in a few days. As well, all the slides will be posted to our website. And the answers to the questions, even the questions we don't get to today, will be posted to the website. Also, just want to give you all a heads up that we will have a series of webinars come the fall season. We don't have dates yet, but we will be offering a webinar on what we call our Municipal Class Environmental Assessment 101. That's our classroom course. We're converting that to a webinar. That'll be offered in the fall. As well, as soon as the MECP, approves the proposed amendments to the Class EA, we will be hosting webinars on the amendments so that you can get familiar with those. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul now, but before Paul gets started, I want to ask him a question I know many of you are going to ask anyways, and that's just to give us a quick update on where we're at with the amendments and the republishing of the MCEA manual. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the introduction. Welcome, everybody, this afternoon. Yeah, as Dan said, I'm sure everybody's a little curious about this amendment to the Class EA. We've been working on it for some time. It was actually submitted. We worked on it last summer and had it submitted for September 30th deadline the ministry had. And we kind of felt that approval would move fairly quickly after that, but I guess it hasn't. We did work over the winter back and forth quite a bit with the ministry staff on exactly what should be contained in the amendment and the exact wording and justifications. And basically we had it ready to go, we felt, by January. And then in February, the ministry, we thought it was to get posted, but the ministry did tell us in February that they want to actually do some changes to the EA Act, and we're not privy to what those changes are, but they wanted to announce those and announce our amendment and other amendments. There's other Class EAs in the same queue to be amended at the same time as ours. And they wanted to do this all at once, and it was scheduled for February. It was scheduled for April. Of course, you all know what happened in March. COVID came along and the world changed, and certain aspects of the world ground to a halt. So really, we've been sitting waiting on that. I just before we signed on, I listened to the Premier who said some encouraging things about COVID and the state of emergency perhaps winding down before too long. So this is all good. And I guess we assume that when the COVID emergency winds down, the pace of the other government issues that they're going to deal with will pick up, and hopefully ours will be one of them. But there's, you know, the staff we're working with don't have any control over that. It's controlled at the cabinet level. So, so we don't really know when, but we're hopeful that it will be soon. That's about all I can say. Topics for today. So what we're really going to talk about is the Schedule A+ consultation. And there's, I mean, for years now, there's been Schedule A and A+, and we just provided this little bit of guidance about notify the stakeholders. One of the things we're doing in the amendment is shifting more projects into that category, and we felt it's kind of important to get some real guidelines or guidance on consultation. So we'll talk a little bit about the minimum requirements and about how the complexity of the project, the complexity of the Schedule A+ project should dictate the level of consultation. And then we'll look at a few actual project examples just to give you a feel for our suggestion. So moving ahead, so in the Class EA for Schedule B and C, there are minimum legal requirements, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. There's a fairly detailed process for issuing a notice of commencement. There's mandatory public contact. If it's a Schedule C, then there's a mandatory second public contact. And then there's a very specific notice of completion and place on the public record for 30 days. That's all described in the Class EA, and I think everybody's familiar with it. And of course, this flow chart everybody knows about, and it sets out how you do those Schedule B's and C's. So that's, we're not going to talk about that today because we want to focus on the A+, but just as an example. So the Schedule A and A+, they are actually now considered exempt. And remember, historically, the Class EA described them as pre-approved. And anyway, there was some legal interpretations that there was no such thing as pre-approved. So last June, when the province amended the EA Act, they actually amended it and put right in the Act that Schedule A and A+ projects are exempt. It's called exempt, not pre-approved. And because they're exempt, there's no formal process for the projects at all. So there's no notice of completion. There's no ability for Part 2 order requests. This is an interesting one that I admit I didn't find out till well after this was done, is that it is actually not possible to elevate a Schedule A or A+ project to Schedule B or C. That's because they are exempt from the Act. So the Act, because the Act exempts them, you can't just come along and say, well, I think this is a complex project. I think I should elevate it to a Schedule B. That's not allowed. But what the document, what our Class EA does say, is that for Schedule A and A+ projects, the proponent needs to act responsibly and consult with the community. So you notice we have A and A+, and they're both exempt. So why didn't we just why have just category A and they're all known as exempt? And the reason for that is we put projects in Schedule A where we really don't anticipate the need for any consultation. So if it's in Schedule A, it's generally a maintenance activity, operations, something that there's really no expectation that there should be any consultation. And the other category that we're putting in the Schedule A is if something is approved via another process, and particularly the Planning Act. And if it's approved, it's covered by the Planning Act. The Planning Act, there's been public participation through the Planning Act. So it would be, of course, a duplication to try and do it again. Or if you called it A+, you would have just said, well, your notice to the community has already been covered. So you'll see Schedule A, there's really no expectations that there should be consultation, and there never has in the past either. So this is nothing new. We're just clarifying. However, for Schedule A+, we want to really reinforce the responsibility is on the proponent to consult/notify the community and the stakeholders. But we have to recognize that some projects within Schedule A+ are pretty routine, and they really should have just this minimum notification. Whereas others that are encompassed within the Schedule A+ have significant potential for significant local impacts. So these can be very important to the community, and a simple notification that you're doing something is not sufficient. So you need to gauge the level of complexity with the level of effort that you put into your consultation practices. And Section 8.2.1.1 of the Class EA, the amended section, this is something we amended and put in there, really talks about this and reinforces that you need to match your complexity to your level of effort. So what it talks about is, what you should think about is your project, rather than the bare minimum notification, think about, would the community benefit from more public engagement? And if the answer is yes, then you should work at more public engagement and and include it. Ask yourself, would the community benefit from a detailed consideration of alternatives? Is this a project that legitimately has 2 or 3 different alternatives that could be viable solutions, and you really need to thoroughly analyze those and portray this to the community? Then you should do that as part of your Schedule A+ consultation. And then sometimes a very thorough documentation is important for historical purposes, for a variety of reasons. And if that's the case, then be sure and do that documentation recorded. Even though there's no requirement for the development of an ESR, for example, at the end, there's no requirement for formal notice of completion. And not only no requirement, you're not in that process. You can still create documentation that outside an EA process. So you need to think about those questions for your projects. And the caution we would make is, if you come to the conclusion that for a particular project, you need to do some of these extra things, when the next project comes along, don't automatically make that the new norm, that you do it for every project. If the project was unique and you put a unique level of effort into it, don't do that same level of effort for the next project unless it has the same level of complexity. So for an A+ project, you really should have a consultation plan. And this slide actually is from a presentation I did earlier about Schedule B and C projects. So you still should have a consultation plan that identifies the stakeholders, what means are you going to use to contact them, the level of consultation, and the general timing of the contact, of when you're going to contact all the stakeholders. So you need to, for even the simplest A+ projects, you should go through this thought process of identifying those stakeholders, deciding how to contact them, deciding on the level of consultation you're proposing, and the timing. So identifying those stakeholders, you need to think about adjacent owners and tenants, the people that use the project, it's a bridge, for example, it's not the adjacent people that are the users. The general community, special community groups, government agencies, indigenous people. You need to think about each one of those groups and identify the specifics for each group of stakeholders of how you would deal with them. So in terms of means of contact, there's lots of different options available. So here in the Class EA Schedule B or C, I mean, you're a little bit constrained, or there's certainly some strong guidelines on how to do things. Here it's completely up to you, but the same options are available. There's letters, signage, flyers, emails, websites, personal contact, press releases, paid ads in one medium or another, and social media. So those are just some examples of how you can contact people. And the really good thing you need to think about is who are your stakeholders, and match the means of contact with the stakeholders you identified, and use the appropriate means that's best. So adjacent owners, you either want to reach them maybe with letters, or you maybe want to reach them with flyers if it's maybe there's a bunch of commercial tenants that you want to reach. Users of the project, as I said, a bridge, maybe you need signage on the bridge of, hey, this project coming up. Ads, general community, so there's ads, press release, social media, a website. Special community groups, if they have a personal interest, probably warrant personal contact would be a good idea. Emails is good for governments and agencies. Indigenous people, hopefully you have a relationship developed, but however that relationship calls for, but personal contact, email, letters, those are the typical types of approach. Then you got to decide on the level of consultation. Does your Schedule A project warrant having an open house or a public meeting? Should there be personal meetings or on-site meetings? Should there be a website? Should there be an open house, virtual or otherwise? Should there be community surveys? Should there be online discussion groups? These are all things that you could consider. Personal meetings allows a lot of nice, good discussion, and it's time consuming, but it can be very worthwhile and probably key on some projects. Website's an excellent way to get the message out, and a good opportunity for feedback in, whether it's just something on your municipal website or a whole new website would again depend on the complexity of the project. So the general timing, what you want to think about is what are going to be the steps, how many times are you going to contact the stakeholders, when. You can adjust that during the process, depends how it all unfolds. And how does it relate to other processes if there's something else going on that this project hinges upon? Make sure you portray those factors in what you're thinking about. So, and again, those are the same things you think about in your consultation plan for a Schedule B and C. And I know some of you are thinking, well, Schedule A's are supposed to be a lot less effort and simpler. And a lot of the projects are. So for example, resurfacing a street is a Schedule A+, putting in a new culvert, building a new fence, new retaining wall. There's a couple of things that are new here to the list, new LID features. Low impact design features. This was never mentioned in the MCEA, and this is one of the amendments we're trying to, it's in the amendments to include them as Schedule A+ projects. Noise barriers, utilities, traffic control, standing services in rights of way. Upgrades at your wastewater facilities, depending on the project. It could be an A+ project, and it could be relatively simple. So for these type of simple projects, and I kind of classify these as the notice type. Let's just take the example of building a new fence. So you're going to build a new fence. Seems reasonable to me that you should identify the stakeholders and they're the adjacent owners. And that's probably the extent of it. Means of contact, probably simplest to just send them a letter. Level of consultation, I think probably one notice, explain the project details, the construction, timing, and the timing of the contact before you start construction. So there, developing your consultation plan took all of 5 or 10 minutes. But you still thought through all those processes. So you thought about it. You don't even have to write it down, really. But you thought about who are the stakeholders, how are you going to contact them, what's the level of contact, and what's the timing. And there, we're done. What's that taken us? 2 minutes, and we've done a consultation plan for a simple Schedule A+ project. Now, then you have to just send the letters out. And there's an example of what a letter might look like. You know, here's a letter that you get your staff to look up the addresses. Town of South Falls is planning and installing a new fence along the east side of a road. During the construction season, work is scheduled to begin on June 3rd. So you've timed this letter probably after you've added or even awarded the contract, and before the contractor starts, you're getting these letters out so you know it's going to begin on June 3rd and be done by the end of July. Fence, tell people what it is. It's a wooden privacy fence. It's going to be on the municipal side of the rear property line, and so be the town's fence and maintained by the town in the future. The contractor shouldn't need to disturb or access their property. So you just let everybody know there is a contact at the bottom of the letter in case there is a question about the project. But for a simple project, a simple consultation plan, a simple notice, that's all that's required. So there's other projects where probably, maybe, likely not just a notice, but maybe some opportunity for input or feedback is warranted. And things like streetscaping, adding cycle lanes, traffic calming, localized improvements, perhaps maybe a roundabout at an intersection. Reconstructing a street, depends. Redesignating a street, changing it to a one-way, for example. Reconstructing a bridge, perhaps. Building a new active transportation bridge. Utilities, crossing a water course. These are all things that might be in this category of, I think it's more than just a letter of notice. So just taking an example here. If you're building this new bikeway and you identify this, so again, you go through the thought process, identify the stakeholders. Well, there's going to be the adjacent owners along the corridor, cycling groups, general public are probably all going to have some opinions. Means of contact, so combination of letters, ads, social media, some press release. Level of consultation, maybe you feel this one it warrants one open house where you can gather the different groups together, and then you'll finalize things and present a report to council. So instead of the Schedule B or C process where there's this notice of completion and placed on the public record, then there is something produced in terms of some sort of report that would go to an appropriate committee, a committee of council, and that would be that's your approval of the project. And the timing of the contract, when is it supposed to begin, when is it supposed to end, when's the timing of things. So again, not a large job likely to decide on that consultation plan for this project that's a little more complex. And here's just an example. So we're going to design the London Beckwith Bikeway public consultation session. And members of the public are invited to show up between 5 and 7. And there's even an optional walking tour, so a little site tour at 6 o'clock. So the city is proposing this active transportation improvements on the street. So and you can put in a sketch. So this is the type of notice you could provide. And again, there's contact information. So a drop-in format with an optional walking tour for those that want to go out and see things. So you'd have one opportunity for feedback, and then you get your feedback, you finalize a report. And I think in many municipalities, something like that would head off to a committee of council for approval. It depends on your municipality, the approval process. Maybe it heads off to a commissioner for approval or something. Now, other projects can be fairly complex. And I put Reconstruct Main Street as the first one. Well, if you actually look at the descriptions in the Class EA, there's no description that says reconstruct Main Street. It's just reconstruction of streets and streetscaping. They're all just A+. And this is where you have to decide yourself. Reconstructing a street, in a local subdivision, I would imagine is a lot less complex project than maybe I should phrase it the other way around. Reconstructing the main street through a commercial core where there's businesses and parking and streetscaping and all these competing interests is probably an awfully lot more complex than reconstructing a street in a residential subdivision. And although they're the same project description in the Class EA, and of course, and they're both Schedule A+ projects, and always have been. This is not a new thing. They've always have been Schedule A+ projects. There's a very large difference in the complexity of those those projects. So you need to treat them as complex projects. Some other examples are reconstructing a heritage bridge, particularly in a high-profile area like downtown. Building now, these are some new ones that have been added, shifted from Schedule B or C into A+. Is building a new pumping station, building new water storage, upgrading treatment facilities up to a 50% increase in the rated capacity of your treatment facility can be a Schedule A+ project. So that could be a very complex project and expensive and warrants some real public contact. On the other hand, you may have done quite a good job on a master plan that sets out how you're going to upgrade your treatment plants, and you've had consultation and feedback with stakeholders during the master plan. So you may have recently completed that, and now you're simply going ahead with the project to expand the treatment capacity by up to 50%. Maybe you've already covered off all the consultation stuff and there's very little that you need to do at this point. So it depends on the project, depends on the circumstances, the timing. Maybe the master plan was done 5 years ago and it's time you need to refresh people's memory of what happened. So all of that needs to be factored into your decisions when you're developing your consultation plan. So, as the example, reconstruct Main Street. So who would your stakeholders likely be? They're likely going to be the general community, adjacent owners. There's likely a BIA or a Chamber of Commerce or both. Could well be a cycling club, an accessibility committee, and making sure that sidewalks align so that storefronts can be accessible or an important goal. And in a lot of places, beautification in the downtown area is very important, and sometimes there's a beautification committee of some form that pursues that. So you've got lots of important stakeholders here. So again, you need to identify the stakeholders, then you need to decide how to best reach them. And press releases, ads, again, the adjacent owners, likely more of the letters, flyers, personal contact, the groups, probably personal contact and or email combination. Then the level of consultation. Well, I don't think it would be unusual to have a series of consultations for completely rebuilding the downtown. There's going to be a lot of stakeholders. So you might want to start with the first open house, let's just say in September, where you're really just reviewing the existing conditions. And I'm sure a lot of businesses will be asking the question of, well, why are you doing this project? Because you're going to shut down my business for the length of time of construction. Is going to be very inconvenient. So you want to explain why the project needs to go ahead. And then this is the chance to identify those priorities for, likely there's priorities for parking, cycling, and streetscaping. And the problem is in most downtown streets, the right-of-way does not allow for everything that everybody wants. It just doesn't fit. So identify it. So you might have an open house that just sets out existing conditions and gets the community to help you identify the priorities. Then you come back, and then you come back a couple of months later with, here's some options for reconstruction. So you have a second open house to show them some options, get some feedback. Then over the winter, you work with the key stakeholders, and you come back in the spring with, here's the recommended plan, and then you present that final plan to council in the spring for approval. Now this looks suspiciously like a Schedule C process in the Class EA, and it is. So there's nothing wrong with following a process very much like a Schedule B or a C process for an A+ project. You just don't have a notice of commencement. You don't call it a Class EA process. You don't have a notice of completion, and you don't have a Part 2 order request at the end. But you can have the documentation, produce a report that's not called an environmental study report, but it's still a report on your findings, on the contact, all the feedback from stakeholders in this final report then goes to the proponent, to the municipality for approval, and there's no Part 2 order request option for it. So you can, for a complex A+ project like this one, rebuilding the main street, I think you're going to be, the level of effort, frankly, is not going to be much different for the schedule, for a Schedule A+ or a Schedule C, because it's warranted. But that's a local decision that the local community makes, and it depends on the local circumstances. So this is just some notices that you might have issued for this main street reconstruction. So you start off with things are in poor condition, end of their useful life, and come to this meeting and we'll talk about priorities. The next time you invite them back, you've identified priorities, and you're going to show people options on alternative ways you could upgrade the street. And then the last is, we've considered these things, and here's the proposed plan that, this particular example, we've developed a plan that maintains an arterial road connection for vehicle traffic in the community, maintains access to businesses and cultural facilities in the downtown, allows as many parking opportunities as possible for the public, so I guess it's limiting the parking, but it does incorporate cycling lanes and it's incorporating some streetscape for a pleasant public space. So sounds like a successful project. Anyway, so this project, the Schedule A+ project, could turn into a consultation very similar to a Schedule C, and that's completely fine. In fact, that's recommended for a very complex project. So that's really the comments I had to make about A+. Just to let you know, we've had, this is the third webinar we've done this spring. The other two we did was effective MCEA consultation during COVID. We got that out, and it covers a little bit of the same topic about how to be effective, but then it focuses in on how you can accomplish that well, with the COVID restrictions. So we explored some options for virtual open houses. So you're welcome to do that. That's recorded and on the website. And then another one that's recorded on the website deals with the Heritage Bridge checklist. There's a new checklist we're just been, I guess, basically finalized. But again, we're waiting on the amendment to the MCEA document. It makes some pretty significant changes. So if you're dealing with a bridge, I suggest you view that. And as Dan mentioned at the beginning, we're looking at doing further training this fall. I think there's going to have to be a special session similar to this one. One of the things we're trying to do is get approval for local, not just local roads, but arterial and collector roads would be approved through the Planning Act. So a subdivision process instead of having to do both a planning application and a Class EA process. And then the amendment, we're going to have a training session specifically on reviewing what's changed in the tables. And then the course that we normally offer in the classroom, the introduction to the Class EA, we're looking at getting that done into a webinar setting. So I guess it's time for questions. Look forward to hearing them. I'll stop sharing my screen now, I guess.
Thank you, Paul. That was very good. I think Paul does a great job at these webinars for the MEA. He's got a great tone as he explains things, and keeps it simple, and I think gets the message across quite effectively. So thank you, Paul. We do have a few questions, which I think we can get to all of them, and I'll read them as they're written. I won't indicate who the name is, but I may have to modify the question because there may be some typos in some of the way these questions are being asked. So the first question, Paul, is for an upgrade of a water or wastewater facility, is there guidance on complexity where it's not an A+?
Well, if it's not an A+ project, then you're either Schedule B or C, and you would need to follow the process in the manual that sets out the contacts and the amount of public consultation. So I'm not sure, I think that answers the question, but maybe I didn't understand the question.
Okay, we'll go to the next one. Slide number 20, Paul. Isn't traffic calming exempt in the Environmental Assessment Act itself? Is this changing?
No, that's correct. It is exempt, but we thought for clarity we would list it in Schedule A+, because everything listed in Schedule A+ is also exempt. So, and we feel that traffic calming is a good example of a project where the municipality should do some kind of notice to the community before implementing an exempt project. So actually we've held that out as the example of, you know, what's historically happened So no, nothing's changing. It's just for reference that we're listing it. It's exempted twice, I guess.
Okay. The next question, Paul, is can a Part 2 order be filed for Schedule A and A+ projects?
No.
We like those one-word answers, Paul. Next question, aren't bridge replacements a Schedule B or C until the new amendments are approved?
Well, right now, if you're replacing a bridge with it and you haven't changed the location, you're not changing the capacity, and it's not a heritage structure, then it's right now a Schedule A+ project. And you know, I still think likely replacing a bridge warrants some kind of notice to at least users. At the very least, you're going to put a sign up on the bridge saying, hey, this bridge is going to be impacted by construction for the next 3 months. You know, you should at least think about it.
Okay. Before I get on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website, along with a package of the slides. So you'll have access to the recording and the slides. As well, we will post answers to all the questions we've presented to Paul and any that don't get to him if we run out of time. So you'll be able to see a log of what questions were asked and how they were answered. So the next question for you, Paul, is how much time before the beginning of construction should notices be sent? Is 2 weeks prior to the start of construction considered enough?
Again, I would say it depends on the project. You know, if it's like that fence example where you're not needing any access to their property, it shouldn't impact them, I would think a couple of weeks might be sufficient. But I know sometimes you're repaving a street, and at least where I worked, we always made an effort to contact people quite a bit ahead of time and say, we're going to be paving the street. If you're thinking of changing your furnace to gas and you want to get gas installed, get it done now, because we don't want you cutting our road after it's paved. And so we would put the effort into notifying people, so, you know, months ahead of time to allow that kind of stuff. So it depends on the project.
Well, if I may add, my experience, my past municipal experience, depending on the complexity and the size of your municipality, a resurfacing contract could be a half dozen roads or it could be 100 roads, depending on where you work. And if it's a complex, large-scale resurfacing program, you're probably better off sending out notices early in the year saying that the road is going to be resurfaced, and then sort of report back maybe a couple of weeks before saying, yeah, we're moving in shortly. And you can get all those things out of the way in the first notice where he says, if you're planning to do something, your sprinkler system or something, give us a call and we'll give you a better idea on the schedule. So I think you're correct, Paul. It's all based on the complexity of the project. Next question, Paul, is you mentioned that it's not possible to elevate Schedule A+ project or B to a, sorry, I'll read that again. You said it's not possible to elevate a Schedule A+ to a B or C. So what needs to be done if during detailed design it was identified that the Schedule A+ is not sufficient enough and requires higher schedule?
Well, I guess I'd go back to how did that get identified? If this is, you know, a project that something's changing in the amendment, then there's a phase-in period, and you can read that in the amendment. But you know, how would it? I don't understand how it could be a Schedule A, identified as Schedule B, but not be a Schedule B. Don't quite understand the question.
It's a tough one to answer, Paul. I'll read the next question. If we can provide a little bit more detail, or if the person that wrote that can email me or Amin, maybe provide a little bit more, be a little bit more specific, and we'll try and answer the question offline when we post the answers to our website. Next question. If a project that would regularly require significant public consultation under Schedule B or even C is now a Schedule A, what is holding the proponent to hold the level of consultation you are describing for this project?
Yeah, I guess just the political responsibility to act appropriately, I think your taxpayers will hold you accountable. So yeah, that's not a legal thing that the ministry is going to enforce. It's a local decision, and I think if the example of the main street, if you decided to just simply go down and rebuild the main street with the way you felt it should be, and you just send out one notice to people saying when we're starting work, I don't think you'd be working there very long.
Okay, the next question, I will say hi to the writer, a friend of mine from Wellington County, is when you say, Paul, present to council for final approval, is this a requirement? Sorry, I'll read this again. Is present to council for final approval a requirement for Schedule A+ projects? I don't believe it's a requirement, as this is where residents could appeal to council on the final design.
Correct. Yeah. No, there's no requirements to the approval process is whatever the approval process for your project in your municipality is. So I just, some projects may culminate in some places in a report going to council, but if it's just a project that was included in the budget and council approved the budget, then that's it. So no.
Okay, next question. For Schedule A+, B, and C projects, is it necessary for the municipal clerk's name to be on the notification, as they are typically in charge of legislative services, or can the public works manager issue the notices should the municipality have a policy which staff member would release the notice? I think I can answer that question, Paul, but I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, no, well, you see all the draft notices under Schedule B and C are signed by the town engineer or city engineer. They're not the clerk, and of course there's no requirement. It's entirely a local decision on who issues anything about a Schedule A+. So.
I'd like to think that us municipal engineers are just as important as the municipal clerk, but that's just me. Next question. Could you repeat the date that A+ projects became exempt?
It was just about a year ago. It was in June last year. I just forget the exact date.
I think you're right. That was an immediate change that took effect last year around May or June.
Yeah, it was when the legislative bill, Better Homes, Better something Act passed.
Just a few more questions here. You mentioned at the end of your presentation that arterial collector roads within subdivisions require an EA. I thought they were exempt under the Planning Act. Can you please expand or correct my assumption?
Yes, currently in the Class EA, local roads within a plan of subdivision are Schedule A activities, so they're exempt. But it's very specific that are only local roads. Arterial and collector roads do not enjoy that exemption. So if you're building a subdivision and it has an arterial road, you need to do a Schedule C Class EA. So we're trying to fix what we feel that is a problem, and we're trying to fix that in this amendment. So it's a fairly complex answer of how that will happen. So I think that warrant is going to warrant a separate session.
Next question, would a master plan have to be identified? Sorry, I'll read that again. Would a master plan have to have identified a project as an A or A+ in order for it to be exempt?
Well, I guess you don't have, the master plan should identify the project, but it doesn't have to say bracket Schedule A+ project. It just is a project, and then you look it up and you see in the Class EA that it is an A+, and it is. I don't think it's absolutely necessary that you state that in your master plan.
And I have before me the final question, Mr. Knowles. If a municipal bridge rehab falls under transit expansion projects, and transit projects are streamlined processes by regulation, transit expansion also partnered with province and Metrolinx So for such projects, how to proceed? How do we proceed with the provincial EA or MCEA? I was a little disjointed in reading that to you, Paul. Do you want me to repeat it?
So I think I get the gist of it, and I got to say this is a bit complex. I think we're just actually still even this morning still finalizing some changes to the Class EA, to the transit section of the Municipal Class EA. And so there's going to be some guidance on how this will work. I'd say the question you're asking, the answer certainly has not been has not been consistent. There hasn't been a consistent application of things. So that is something we're working to clarify. And I think we better just leave it at when the amendment comes out, it should be clear. But it comes down to the regulation only applies if the project is entirely transit, and a lot of projects are both transit and municipal roads. So if the project involves both, then you need to use the Class EA. Class EA has different requirements, and anyway, we're trying to sort that out. And I think as of this morning, I think we've managed to do that. So, but I think that's all I can maybe verbally answer here.
Okay, we don't have any more questions. I would like to wrap up once again. First of all, I want to say thanks to you, Paul, for doing this. Secondly, I want to thank Amin. So Amin sets these webinars up for us. He's the technical whiz of the group by means of his age. He's a lot better at doing this than we are, and he's a big help to both Paul and I in putting these things together. MEA is subscribed to Zoom webinar now, and we have capacity for up to 500 participants. We apologize to some of you when we first launched this this webinar registration. We had only applied for a license that would give us up to 100 registrations. We realized that that was probably not a good idea, especially when we're offering free webinars. We're going to get a lot more than 100 people participating. So we're up to the 500 level now. I'll also repeat, this is being recorded. It will be posted to our website along with the slide deck and along with all the questions and answers that were provided. We are offering some more webinars coming in the fall. So keep an eye on our website. Keep an eye on our both our MCEA website and our MEA website. Keep your eye, if you're an MEA member, keep an eye out for our newsletters as well as e-blasts and social media. We're active on social media. So we'd hopefully have some of you come back and visit us at a future webinar in late September, maybe October. And we wish you all a great summer and a safe summer. And hopefully we'll get through this COVID thing before too long. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.